And welcome back, and it is the 26th of March, the higher plus 5 a day, and let's go straight to the first question. Now, before I start, the last few days have definitely been quite difficult, so I'm actually quite interested to know what's going to come up in the next couple of days. Either way, what do we got here? So ABC coordinates, AB is perpendicular to AC, find K. Okay, not an unreasonable start. And so what we're looking to do here is we're looking to remember what perpendicular means. And there's a couple of ways of doing this same question, but first thing I'm going to need to do is actually I'm going to need to work out what the gradient between A and B is. So A to B, let's write down clearly what I'm doing. So A to B has a gradient of, well, it goes from, if I look at the y values, it goes from 9 to minus 3, which is minus 12. And it goes from 2 to 5, which is plus 3, which in other words means my gradient A to B is going to be minus 4. Then if I look at my gradient A to C very similarly. So A, the y value goes from 9 to K, so therefore that is a change of K minus 9. That's also the difficult bit there. And the x values go from 2 to 6, so that is a change of 4. And I can't simplify that anymore. Now what I do know is if they're perpendicular, then the gradients multiply by each other. So n1 times n2 equals minus 1. So that's the key to this question, is knowing that fact there. And I can do that. So I can say minus 4 times the other gradient, which is k minus 9 over 4. That's good because the 4's cancel, equal minus 1. And I'm going to do this in one go. So I'm going to say it slowly. So what's going to happen now is I'm going to cancel my 4's. So 4 divided by 4 goes away. And also I'm going to multiply by minus 1, which gets rid of the minuses on both sides. Which in other words means, and again, pause the video to make sure you're happy with this, but that means that k minus 9 is equal to 1, which means that k must be equal to 10. And that is the first question done. Good question. You might have seen actually the way I sort of paused. I was going to do this using vectors, but that's a bit more A-level than GCSE. So use gradients, probably the way you're expected to do this one. Next question. Okay, and let's just zoom in a little bit. So HIJK is a triangular base pyramid. The base is an equilateral triangle. Right, so there we go. So it tells us the important fact here with side 10, obviously meaning that all sides are 10. The volume of the pyramid is 300. Calculate the perpendicular height h of the pyramid. Okay, so first thing to remember is the volume of a pyramid is going to be a third times the base, which in this case is a triangle area, times the height. And I know that volume is equal to 300. So basically I have an equation I can solve. I also know, well, a couple of ways of doing this. Way one, arguably the easiest way, is I need to work out the area of this triangle, and I could do that by doing, and I've used it a few times, so I'll use it again here. I could use half ABC sine C, or half AB sine C. And I know the side lengths are 10 and 10. And I know because it's an equilateral triangle that the angle at the bottom is 60, so that's going to be sine of 60. So that's going to give me an area, so to be clear, this is the base of a half times 10 times 10, which is 50, times by sine 60, which is root 3 over 2, an exact value you will learn if you haven't already, which is the same as 25 root 3. So again, that's the slightly easier way of doing it. I'll talk about the slightly trickier way of doing it in a second. Let's pull all this together for now. So let's be clear what I've got. So I've got my equation I'm trying to solve here. I know my area volume, or area volume, that doesn't make sense. I know my area is 25 root 3. Well, first of all, let's deal with the third. So multiply both sides by 3, and that's going to tell me that 900 is equal to the area at the bottom, which is 25 root 3, times by h that I don't know, which means that h is equal to 900 over 25 root 3, which is, calculator out, so 12 root 3 in my calculator, but let's make that into a number, 20.8. So that's 20.8. And I'm working in centimetres, aren't I? Yes, I am, 20.8 centimetres. Not that bad. Setup obviously is important here, making sure you know how to calculate the area of a pyramid, or volume of a pyramid, by using the area on the base. Now, if you haven't seen half ABC sine C, the other way that you could do it, although hopefully by this stage you will have, or hopefully by the stage you sit your exam, you will have seen half ABC sine C, is you split the equilateral triangle down into two triangles, and you use this to work out the height. In other words, 10 squared minus 5 squared square rooted, so you Pythagoras to work out the height, and then you do a half a height times the base. So that will get you to the same place. That will work as well. Either way, question done. Next question. what do we have? So the point -6 -7 is the turning point of the graph x squared plus ax plus b. Now, a couple of ways of doing this. The easiest way is to remember completing the square back to front. So if -6 -7 is the vertex, that means I must be able to write my equation as x plus 6 squared plus the value here, which is -7. So it's plus -7, which is just -7. So in other words, I've written the equation and completed in the square form. Now I would have to put a value here. So let's say the value p, because it might be 2x squared or 3x squared. But the question tells me it's 1x squared, so therefore I know I don't need this p here. So that's okay. Now, in order to compare, I'm going to have to expand the brackets. So x plus 6 squared is x squared plus 12x plus 36 minus 7, which is going to be the same as x squared plus 12x. 36 minus 7 is 29, so plus 29. And then just by sheer comparison, I can see that the term before the coefficient of the x is 12, and I can see the b on its own is 29, which means I'm going to write my answers over here. A is equal to 12 and b is equal to 29. And that is question done. Not terrible, but very easy to go the wrong way on that question. Next question. Okay, C and D are two independent events. PC equals this, PD, and actually I've just noticed, I hadn't seen this until I've just read it properly, that is actually a D complement, isn't it? So that means the opposite of D, or P not D if you like. So P not D equals 0.3, and I'm actually going to write, before even reading the question, that implies that PD is equal to 0.7. What does it want me to do? It wants the value of PC intersection D. Now, this is one of these things whereby your teacher should have told you this. Not all teachers do, but it's just been aware of what you're doing. So if I draw a tree diagram, so the tree diagram is the event C happening, and either C can happen or C cannot happen. And the event D happening is here, so D can either happen or D cannot happen. And again, D can happen or D cannot happen. And when I'm thinking about P intersection D, I am by definition thinking about the fact that C happens and then D happens as well. And hopefully what you've seen is the way that I do this. So this is P, C intersection D when they're independent. And that is just going to be, well, I multiply when I go across. So it's just going to be 0.6 times 0.7, which is equal to 0.42. So the answer to this question is 0.42. And it relies on you understanding how to combine independent events. Good question. Final question today, show. Now, show is maths code for you have to show the working. They're looking for you to say some specific things. And what they probably want you to say here, and I say probably because all mark schemes are slightly different, is they want you to recognize that when you have a denominator with a surd and a plus in, you're going to change the plus to a minus or the minus to a plus, and then you're going to multiply top and bottom by that new thing. That's done that bit. So now let's multiply this together. So I'm going to expand the top bracket. So 3 times 1 is 3. 3 times minus 2 is minus 3 root 2. Minus 32 times 1 is minus 32. I'm going to have to tidy that up, but I'll come back to that. And minus and minus is a plus, and 2 times 32 is 64, and the square root of 64 is 8. So I did that all in one go. So again, make sure you're okay with that. So 32 times 2 is 64, square root of 64 is 8, so I just wrote 8. And the bottom is different to 2 squared. So 1 squared is 1, and root 2 squared is 2, so it's 1 minus 2, which is going to be minus 1. Let's carry on over here. Let's collect terms. So 3 plus 8 is 11, and minus 3. Well, I'm going to have to fix this root 32 onto it. So let's do it in a different pen so it's clear. So minus root 32. I'm going to remember that's the same as root 16 times root 2, and root 16 is 4, so that's just 4 root 2. So in other words, I've got minus 3 root 2 minus another 4 root 2s is minus 7 root 2. And I'm dividing all that by minus 1. In other words, I'm multiplying by minus 1 because that's the same effective thing. So my final answer in the form that I want, which is a plus b minus 2, is going to be minus 11 plus 7 root 2. Now, if you wrote that back to front, if you wrote 7 root 2 minus 11, you'd be fine. You get away with that. That's okay. But either way, question done. Probably not as hard as the last couple of days. But again, another nice mix of questions. The questions are really quite different at the moment. That probability question you may not have seen before. Surds question, often people teach that at the end of the course. But again, good mix of stuff going up today. Let me know how you did. Like, subscribe. See you tomorrow. Thanks all.